Hey there, incredible viewers. Get ready for a story that will send shivers down your spine, fill your heart with emotion, and make you question everything you thought you knew about family and betrayal. This is one you absolutely cannot miss. Smash that like button if you're ready for a thrilling ride, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another unbelievable true story. And as always, tell us in the comments what you would do in this situation. It couldn't be. Thomas Blackwood froze. Ahead of him, just a few meters away in the boarding area, stood Amelia Brooks, his ex, the woman who vanished from his life without explanation 3 years ago. But she wasn't alone. She held a small child in her arms, wrapped in a blue coat with bare ears. His breath hitched. It wasn't possible. He'd recognize her anywhere, even with slightly longer hair and a sharper face. Her expression was tense, as if she were on guard, trying to pass unnoticed. He took a step towards her. Amelia looked up, and their eyes met. For an instant, everything seemed to stop. Thomas saw fear in her face, but before he could react, she looked away and quickened her pace. "Amelia!" he tried to call out, but the airport noise drowned his voice. He pushed forward, dodging passengers with luggage, ignoring the blare of announcements. He couldn't lose her again. When he reached the spot where he last saw her, she was gone. A knot formed in his throat. It couldn't be just a coincidence. That child had something unsettling about him. Thomas stood still, trying to calm his racing pulse. His eyes hadn't deceived him. The child had his very own eyes. "Another one?" asked Mark, his business partner and best friend, tilting his head. Thomas took a gulp of his whiskey and nodded. They were in his Mayfair penthouse, the city lights shimmering outside the windows. "I saw her, Mark, there at the airport." Mark set his glass down. "Are you sure? You think you wouldn't recognize her?" Thomas ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "It was her, and she was carrying a child." "A child?" Thomas closed his eyes. "He had my eyes, Mark." The silence became heavy. "Are you saying that?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But I can't get it out of my head." "Did you try to talk to her?" "I tried. She disappeared as always." Mark sighed and rubbed his chin. "Look, buddy, if you think that child might be yours, you have to find out. You can't just sit around waiting for destiny to hand you the answer." Thomas clenched his jaw. "I don't know where to find her." Mark watched him for a moment, and then smiled ironically. "Don't mess with me. You're Thomas Blackwood. If anyone can find a person, it's you." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at his laptop screen, but not reading the pending emails. Amelia. He hadn't seen her in 3 years. 3 years without a single damn explanation. He remembered the day she disappeared. There had been no prior arguments, no signs that anything was wrong. Just a terse text message. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." He had tried to find her at first, but there was no trace, as if she had been swallowed by the earth. Now, out of nowhere, she reappeared with a child who had his same gaze. He lit a cigarette, something he only did when his mind was on the verge of collapse. He couldn't leave it like this. He was going to find her. And this time, he wouldn't let her escape without answers. "You don't look good, Thomas." Mark crossed his arms as he observed him. They were in the offices of Blackwood Capital, the investment fund they had built together over the last decade. Thomas had spent days with a distant look and a furrowed brow, which for anyone who knew him meant he was on the verge of exploding. "I haven't slept well. Don't tell me." Mark smiled wryly. "Have you found anything?" Thomas grabbed his cell phone and impatiently swiped the screen. "I called some contacts, but I don't have anything yet. Nobody knows about her. So why don't you try looking for her yourself?" "Because I don't know where to start," Mark scoffed. "Brother, stop messing with your head and do what you'd do with any other investment. Look for information. Didn't you have acquaintances in Bristol? You said she was from there, right? Thomas remained silent. Maybe someone has seen her. A friend. An old contact. What do you have to lose by trying? Thomas sighed. Nothing. Exactly. So get your butt in gear and start looking. That afternoon, Thomas drove to Bristol. As he drove, his mind raced uncontrollably. The child. Since he saw him, the image had been stuck like a splinter in his skin. He couldn't stop thinking about his eyes. His mother always said that the Blackwoods had an unmistakable gaze, that intense blue that was rarely seen in England. If Amelia had had a child, why did she never tell him anything? If he was his, why did she hide something like that from him? He gripped the steering wheel tightly. The idea that she could have hidden something so important filled him with rage, but there was also fear. Fear of discovering that he had lost 3 years of his son's life. The search in Bristol was more difficult than he imagined. He asked in cafes, bookstores, and even universities, but no one seemed to know her. Until he arrived at a small diner near the city center. "Amelia Brooks?" he asked the waitress, showing her an old photo on his phone. The woman frowned, as if trying to remember. "I think I've seen her. She comes sometimes with her child." Thomas's heart raced. "Do you know where she lives?" "No. But she usually comes in the afternoons." Thomas ordered a coffee and waited. The clock struck 6 when Amelia entered the diner. Thomas saw her before she noticed him. She wore a gray coat, the same one she had on at the airport. She walked quickly as if she were used to surveying her surroundings. And there he was, the child, Leo. She held his hand, and Thomas's blood ran cold. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. He stood up just as Amelia looked up and saw him. Her eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "I could ask you the same thing." The tension was unbearable. Amelia straightened, as if trying to block her reaction. "It's not the time. You've been hiding from me for 3 years. I think any time is good." She pressed her lips together. "I have nothing to say to you." Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "Really?" He looked at the child. "Nothing to say to me?" Amelia swallowed hard and looked around nervously. "Don't do this here." Thomas leaned towards her, his voice low and tense. "Is that child mine?" Amelia felt the world crashing down on her. Amelia felt her throat constrict. The diner seemed to have fallen silent. The weight of Thomas's question was unbearable, and although her instinct screamed at her to run, she knew that this time she couldn't escape. "Amelia." His voice was low, contained, but dangerous. "Answer me." She swallowed hard and looked at Leo, who was playing with a plastic spoon on the table. "Not here," she whispered. Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "Then where? Because it seems that if I don't accidentally find you, you are never going to tell me." Amelia felt the burning in her eyes, but she forced herself to stand firm. "My place." Thomas watched her, doubting. "It's not a trap," she said wearily. He nodded warily. "Let's go." Amelia's apartment was small, 2 sparsely furnished rooms. Thomas looked around without saying anything, but his expressions said it all. "She lived like this with my son." Leo fell asleep on the couch as soon as they arrived. Thomas stared at him. "Is he mine?" he asked again, bluntly. Amelia felt her stomach clench. "Yes." The word hung in the air. Thomas let out a sigh, as if he had been punched in the chest. He ran his hands over his face, and then walked to the window, turning his back. "When did you know?" "From the beginning." "And you never thought to tell me?" "I couldn't." Thomas turned sharply. "You couldn't? Why?" Amelia closed her eyes for a second before speaking. "Your mother forced me to leave." Thomas's face hardened. "What?" "When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to tell you, but Lillian got to me first. She told me you were no longer interested in me, that you were with another woman." Thomas's eyes widened with fury. "That's a lie." "I know, but at the time I didn't know. and she offered me money to disappear so I wouldn't cause you problems. Did you accept? No. Amelia lifted her chin. I left because she made me doubt, because I felt displaced before I could even talk to you. Thomas felt his blood boil. I can't believe my mother would do that. Amelia lowered her gaze. I didn't expect you to. The silence between them was thick. I need a moment, he said, moving towards the door. Thomas! He stopped, but didn't turn around. I'm not leaving, he said firmly. Leo is my son. I'm not disappearing. And he walked out, leaving Amelia with a lump in her throat. Thomas walked aimlessly through the streets of Bristol, his mind reeling uncontrollably. His mother, Lillian Blackwood, had always been a calculating woman, but he never thought she would go so far. Manipulating Amelia, making her believe he had forgotten her, and worst of all, hiding his own son from him. He leaned against a wall and closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Leo. Now everything made sense. From the moment he saw the child, he knew there was something more, something that couldn't just be a coincidence. Now he had certainty. He was his son. 3 years. 3 damned years that had been stolen from his life. He felt a fierce rage, a need to confront his mother at that very instant. But he knew he first had to resolve something more important. Amelia, she had kept him away. Yes, but now he understood why. And although his anger was still there, he also knew he couldn't afford to keep losing time with his son. He picked up his phone and dialed. Mark, now what have you done? I have a son. There was a long silence. Tell me it's not a joke. It's not. His name is Leo. Amelia hid him from me, but not of her own accord. It was my mother. Mark let out an expletive. Damn it, Thomas, what are you going to do? Thomas looked at the dark sky over Bristol. I'm going to meet my son. When he returned to Amelia's apartment, she was still sitting on the couch, hands clasped. I thought you wouldn't come back, she said without looking at him. I'm not that kind of person. She gave a dry. I didn't know what kind of person you were when I left. He clenched his jaw. That doesn't matter anymore. What matters is Leo. Amelia nodded slowly. He's asleep. Thomas looked at the room where his son was resting. His son. He still couldn't believe it. I want to see him. She hesitated for a moment, but finally stood up and carefully opened the door. The room was small, dimly lit by a nightlight. Leo slept with a relaxed face, hugging a worn stuffed animal. Thomas slowly approached. He knelt by the bed and looked closely at him. Every feature, every small gesture, was his. He felt a lump in his throat. 3 years. 3 years of not seeing him grow, of not hearing his first word, of not knowing anything about him. And that wasn't going to continue. He turned to Amelia, his voice barely a whisper. I'm not going to lose any more time with him. She looked at him, with something that looked like sadness in her eyes. I know. Thomas stood there, watching his son sleep. Nothing in the world would separate him from him again. I want to be in his life. Amelia carefully closed the door to Leo's room and stood with her back to Thomas. His voice still echoed in her head. He didn't say it as a plea or as a negotiation. He said it with the certainty of a man who had made an irrevocable decision. She took a deep breath before turning. I don't know how to do this. Thomas looked at her sternly. Neither do I, but we're going to find a way. The silence between them was long, awkward. You can't just show up and make decisions, Amelia finally said. It's not a decision, it's a right. He's my son. Amelia clenched her fists. And what do you want to do? Move in here, burst into his life and change everything? I don't want to hurt him, he replied, controlling his anger. But I can't act as if nothing happened. She ran a hand over her face. I'm not ready for this, Thomas. Well, you'd better get ready, he blurted out, because I'm not disappearing. Amelia fell silent, looking at him with a mixture of fear and resignation. She knew he meant it. Thomas stayed in Bristol. He rented a small but comfortable apartment in the city center. He didn't want to pressure Amelia or Leo, but he wasn't going to leave. The first few days were difficult. Amelia set strict boundaries. She let him see Leo, but always with her present. No impromptu visits, no sudden changes. Thomas accepted the rules, at least for now. He knew he had to earn her trust. More importantly, he had to earn his son's trust. "Who are you?" Leo asked, looking at him curiously. It was the first time they were alone, even if only for a few minutes. While Amelia made coffee in the kitchen, Thomas smiled nervously. "I'm Thomas. Are you Mom's friend?" Thomas swallowed hard. "Something like that." Leo frowned, thoughtful. "You talk like me." Thomas chuckled. "How so?" "Fast and serious," the child said. Shrugging, Thomas felt a strange warmth in his chest. "Maybe because we're alike." Leo stared at him, as if trying to find something in his face. "Are you going to come often?" "If your mom lets me, yes." The child studied him a little more, and then nodded naturally. "Okay," Thomas smiled. He knew he still had a long way to go, but at least he had taken the first step. "You can't expect everything to be easy." Amelia had her arms crossed as she looked at Thomas from the doorway. Leo had just fallen asleep after spending the afternoon with his father, and the atmosphere between them was tense. Thomas took a deep breath. "I don't expect it to be easy, but I'm not going to stand by and watch from the sidelines either." She shook her head, exhausted. "You don't understand how complicated this is. Leo has only had me. Ooh. His world is small, safe, and now suddenly you appear." "Because I should have always been here," he interrupted firmly. "And don't tell me it wasn't my decision, because I already know that. But now it is." Amelia lowered her gaze, biting her lip. "Do you really think this is solved just by wanting to be here?" Thomas crossed his arms. "How do you want me to do it then? Should I leave and wait for an invitation in a few years?" "No, Amelia. I'm not going to make that mistake." She pressed her lips together, grappling with her thoughts. "I don't want Leo to suffer," she murmured. "Neither do I." There was a long silence between them. Finally, Amelia sighed. "Fine, we'll try, but at my pace. The only thing I want is for you to let me be his father." Amelia's eyes darkened for an instant. "That's something that will take time." Thomas nodded. "I'm not in a hurry." She didn't believe him. She knew Thomas Blackwood had never been a patient man. The following days were strange. Thomas spent more time with Leo, naturally gaining his trust. Despite the years of distance, the child seemed to accept him with ease. But not everything was so simple. Every time Thomas held him, every time Leo sought him out with excitement, Amelia felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief because her son deserved to have a father. Fear because she didn't know how much longer she could keep the chaos this brought into her life under control. And then, one afternoon, chaos found her first. Amelia was at the market when she felt a chill. She knew that feeling, that pressure in her chest, that certainty that something was wrong. She turned slowly, and there she was, Lillian Blackwood. The woman was impeccable as always, her hair perfectly styled, and her elegant posture, even though the market was not the kind of place where one would expect to find her. Amelia felt her blood run cold. "I can't believe you're here," Lillian said, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. Amelia clenched her fists. "I'm not doing this." She turned to leave, but Lillian stopped her with a subtle movement, barely a brush on her arm. "Not so fast," she whispered. "You haven't forgotten what we talked about 3 years ago, have you?" Amelia felt nauseous. "You lied to me. You told me Thomas had another life, that he didn't care." Lillian smiled without humor. "And wasn't it easier that way? For everyone." "Not for us," Lillian's eyes hardened. Don't make this more difficult, Amelia. Difficult for whom? For you? For Leo? Lillian said softly. Don't think Thomas will be able to handle this. His life isn't made for a child. Do you really want your son to go through everything it means to be a Blackwood? Amelia felt a lump in her throat. I don't care what you think. You should. Because if you continue with this, he'll take him from you. Fear hit her like a punch. He wouldn't. Are you not sure? Because I am. Amelia felt her heart race. Lillian looked at her calmly, as if she already knew she had won. I'm going to give you one last chance, Amelia, to do the right thing. Amelia felt the tremor in her hands, but she didn't let it show. I'm not leaving. Lillian sighed. Then prepare to lose. And without another word, she walked away. Amelia stood there, feeling the ground sink beneath her feet, because she knew Lillian Blackwood didn't make empty threats. Amelia closed her apartment door, her heart pounding. Her hands had been cold for hours since her encounter with Lillian. She couldn't get Lillian's words out of her head, her calculating tone, the certainty with which she had said, "He'll take him from you." She leaned her back against the door and took a deep breath. She couldn't fall into a panic. She couldn't afford to tremble. Her instinct screamed at her to run, that she had to disappear before Lillian carried out her threat. But she couldn't. Leo already knew Thomas, already saw him as someone important in his life. Leaving again was not an option, but neither could she stand idly by. Thomas arrived the next day, knowing nothing. What's wrong? He asked as soon as he saw her. Amelia couldn't hide it entirely. She looked more tense, more tired. Nothing, she replied, looking away. Thomas frowned. Don't lie to me. Something happened. Amelia hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure if she should tell him, but then she remembered that Thomas wasn't the same man he was 3 years ago. Your mother came to see me. Thomas fell silent. His gaze changed immediately. What did she say? That I should leave. That I should do the right thing. Thomas let out a low laugh, but not of amusement. Of course she did. Amelia crossed her arms. She meant it, Thomas, I know. But I also know that I'm not going to let her win. Amelia felt a shiver. It's not a game. Thomas looked at her intently. Do you think I don't know that? The atmosphere between them was heavy, but neither of them looked away. Leave it to me, he finally said. I'm going to fix this. Amelia let out an incredulous laugh. You can't fix your mother, but I can make sure she never comes near you again. Amelia looked at him. How? Thomas smiled, but it was a cold smile. Leave it to me. Thomas wasted no time. He called her that same afternoon. Mother, Lillian answered calmly. Thomas, she said. What a surprise. We'll skip the formalities. I know you talked to Amelia. Lillian didn't say anything for a moment. Then her tone changed. I did it because I'm worried. Thomas clenched his jaw. Don't give me that. You did it because you hate not being in control. I'm thinking about your future. No, he interrupted her. You're thinking about yours. There was a long silence. That child doesn't fit into your life, Thomas. Thomas felt something break inside him. Are you really saying that? I'm not saying you don't want him. I'm saying he's not part of what you've built. Thomas closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Listen to me closely, Mom. I'm going to make this clear so there are no misunderstandings. Leo is my son, and you will not interfere in his life or mine again. Lillian sighed. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. I'm setting boundaries. That's what you think. But in the end, Thomas, you always come back to me. Not this time. Lillian remained silent, and for the first time in his life, Thomas felt she didn't have the upper hand. Do what you want, she said coldly, but don't be surprised when things get complicated. Things are already complicated, and even so, I prefer this to continuing to be the obedient son you want." He hung up before she could respond. For the first time, he felt he had struck the first blow. But he knew Lillian Blackwood wouldn't stand idly by. Thomas closed his eyes and exhaled sharply. He had just defied Lillian Blackwood, something very few had done without consequences, but this time he wasn't going to back down. He ran a hand over his face and then looked at his phone. He had to focus on what was important. Leo. The last thing he wanted was for his son to suffer because of his mother's manipulations. He had to strengthen his relationship with him. He had to show Amelia that he was here to stay. And he knew exactly how to start. "Do you want us to go out together? The three of us?" Amelia frowned, surprised by Thomas's proposal. "Just to the park," he clarified. "I'm not saying we should move in together." Amelia crossed her arms. "Why do you suddenly want to do this?" "Because I want to get to know Leo in his environment, without him feeling like I'm forcing him into something." She sighed, hesitating. Thomas didn't blame her, but after a long silence, she nodded. Okay. The park was full of children running and playing on the swings. Leo pulled away from his mother's hand and approached curiously. Thomas followed him with his gaze, not knowing quite what to do. "You've never dealt with children, have you?" Amelia asked softly. Thomas let out a dry laugh. "No, it shows." She watched him for a moment and then sighed. "Just follow him. Let him set the pace." Thomas didn't respond, but walked to where Leo was playing with the sand. "What are you building?" he asked. Leo looked up, thoughtful, and then nodded. "Can I help you?" Thomas knelt and picked up some sand, not knowing exactly what to do with it. "Not like that," Leo said impatiently. "First you have to make a base." Thomas smiled without realizing it. "And how do I do that?" Leo sighed, as if talking to an absolute beginner. "I'll show you." And for the next half hour, Thomas listened carefully to each of his instructions. Amelia watched them from afar. She saw the way Leo spoke without fear, how Thomas listened patiently, how he laughed at the little things. She never imagined seeing them like this, and against all odds, her son seemed to trust him in a natural way. That was what scared her the most, because if Leo started to love him, if he started to see him as part of his life, she couldn't afford to lose Thomas again. Because if he left again, this time he would not only break her heart, he would also break her son's. Amelia couldn't stop watching them. Thomas and Leo were still in the sand, now trying to build a tower taller than the previous one. Leo laughed every time the structure collapsed, while Thomas feigned frustration. It was a simple scene, but the feeling it evoked in Amelia was anything but simple. It was fear, not because Thomas was failing, but because he seemed to be doing well, too well. Every day, Leo became more accustomed to his presence, sought him out with more confidence, no longer showed shyness when Thomas arrived, and although Amelia knew it was what should happen, she couldn't ignore the worry that gnawed at her chest. What would happen if Thomas got tired, if he decided this was too much for him, if, after all, he ended up being just a visitor in Leo's life? "Are you tense again?" Thomas's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood in front of her, with Leo running around the patio. Amelia looked away. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," he said bluntly. "What's wrong?" She took a moment to reply. "I'm scared," she confessed softly. Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Of what?" Amelia swallowed hard before looking at him. "That this won't last." Thomas's face hardened. "I'm not leaving." "You say that now." "I say that because it's the truth." Amelia shook her head. "Thomas, you have another life. Businesses, trips, commitments. I don't know how long you can keep this up." Thomas crossed his arms. "What if I tell you I'm not leaving, that I'm not just here for a while?" Amelia looked at him with a mixture of skepticism and a desire to believe him. "I don't know if I can risk trusting that." Thomas took a step closer, his voice lower, but firm. "It's not just about you, Amelia. It's about Leo." She felt a lump in her chest. "I know," she whispered, "but that's precisely what scares me the most." The following days, Amelia tried to act normal. She didn't want to let her fear sabotage everything. But Thomas was perceptive. He watched her, noticed when she drifted off in her head, when she seemed to doubt every time Leo hugged him with excitement. And one day, after putting Leo to sleep, she couldn't take it anymore. "Tell me the truth, Amelia." She looked up from the teacup she held in the kitchen. "About what?" Thomas looked at her seriously. "About what's really worrying you." Amelia put the cup on the table and sighed. "I don't want Leo to get attached to you if you're not sure you're going to stay." Thomas put his hands on the table, looking at her intently. "Amelia, this is not a game for me." "You say that now." Thomas clicked his tongue impatiently. "I'm not a child. I'm not doing this on a whim. I'm here because I want to be." Amelia held his gaze, feeling her heart beating too fast. "What if one day you decide you can't do this anymore?" He straightened up. "Then tell me what I have to do to prove to you that I'm not leaving." Amelia felt her throat constrict. Because she had no answer. Because part of her didn't want one. And because she knew that if he kept insisting, she would end up falling. Thomas didn't bring up the subject again after that night on the balcony. But Amelia knew he was waiting. He didn't say it. He didn't show it in an obvious way. But she saw it in his eyes every time they were close, in the patience with which he treated her, in the way he left space for her to make the decision. And the worst part was that, with each passing day, she felt her own defenses weakening. But then, everything changed. Thomas received the call when he least expected it. He was in his office reviewing some reports when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered immediately. "Mr. Blackwood?" The voice on the other end of the line sounded formal, but with a hint of urgency. "Yes, who is this?" "I'm your mother's lawyer." Thomas felt his blood boil. "What the hell does she want now?" There was a brief silence before the lawyer continued. "I just wanted to inform you that Mrs. Lillian Blackwood has initiated legal proceedings to obtain custody of your son." The air seemed to leave his lungs. "What did you say?" "Mrs. Blackwood has argued that you and the child's mother are not fit to raise him. She has requested an evaluation to determine if Leo would be better off in her care." Thomas's heart pounded with fury. "This is insane!" "I know, sir," the lawyer said in a neutral tone. "But the petition is already in progress." Thomas was speechless. He couldn't believe it. He knew his mother wouldn't give up easily, but he never thought she'd go this far. And the worst part was that now he had to tell Amelia. When he arrived at the apartment, Amelia opened the door with a frown. "What's wrong?" she asked instantly. Thomas didn't waste time. "We have a problem." Amelia felt a chill. "What happened?" "My mother filed a lawsuit to take Leo." The world stopped. "No, she can't do that," Amelia whispered, feeling breathless. "Yes, she can, and she's doing it." Amelia leaned against the wall. "No, this can't be happening." Thomas took her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "I'm going to stop her. I'm not going to let her take our son." But Amelia barely heard him. Her worst fear had come true. Lillian had carried out her threat. And now, if they didn't do something, they could lose everything. Amelia felt her legs tremble. The world was crumbling around her, but Thomas held her firmly by the shoulders. "Look at me," he said in a harsh voice. "We're going to fix this." "How?" she whispered. Fear reflected in her eyes. "It's Lillian. She's powerful. She has money, contacts, lawyers. And so do I." Thomas interrupted. "I'm not going to let her win." But Amelia couldn't breathe. Her whole body was on high alert, as if her instinct screamed at her to run before it was too late. "We need a plan," Thomas continued. "We can't act impulsively." Amelia rubbed her temples. "We can't let this go to trial." "It won't." Amelia looked at him in disbelief. Thomas, your mother doesn't play fair. I know, he said coldly, and that's why I'm going to face her on her own terms. The next few days were chaos. Thomas contacted his trusted lawyers and prepared his defense. Amelia met with specialists to prove that Leo was fine with her, but anxiety kept her from sleeping. Every day she expected to receive a notification, a legal blow that would put them on the ropes, and when it came, it wasn't what she expected. A letter delivered to her door. You have one last chance to do the right thing. Don't make this more difficult for everyone. See you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Lillian. Amelia felt her blood run cold. You're not going alone, Thomas said as soon as he read the letter. I'm not going at all, Amelia replied angrily. If you don't go, you'll just give her more reasons to attack us. Amelia clenched her fists. I'm not going to let her manipulate me again. Thomas looked at her seriously. That's why I'm going with you. She hesitated. She knew facing Lillian was a risk, but she also knew they couldn't keep running. The meeting was in an elegant restaurant, far from the city. Lillian was already waiting when they arrived. She dressed as always, impeccably, with an expression of calm superiority. I see you've brought reinforcements, she said with a sharp smile. Thomas sat down opposite her. Cut the crap, Mom. Lillian sighed with feigned disappointment. Always so aggressive. Amelia crossed her arms. Tell us what you want. Lillian looked at them coldly. I want what's best for Leo. Thomas let out a dry laugh. And you are the best? Of course. Amelia felt like screaming. You don't care about him. You just want to control everything. Lillian gave her a bored look. What I want is to spare him a life of mediocrity. Do you really think you can give him what he needs? Amelia's stomach churned. My son is not an object for you to decide what to do with. Lillian calmly took a sip of her coffee. What he is a Blackwood, and that means he deserves more than you can give him. Thomas looked at her with contained fury. You're not going to touch him. Lillian raised an eyebrow. And what are you going to do to stop me? Silence stretched between them. Amelia felt fear on her skin. Lillian never made empty threats, and the worst part was that she knew it. The war had just begun. Thomas clenched his fists under the table. You're not going to win, Mom. Lillian looked at him with an almost amused smile. And who's going to stop me, you? Yes. His tone was so cold and firm that for the first time Lillian's expression changed. Amelia saw the woman's eyes narrow slightly. She knew she was calculating. She measured her own son as if he were a piece in her game. You have no idea what you're doing, Lillian finally said. Thomas rested his elbows on the table and spoke calmly. Neither do you. The woman raised an eyebrow as if amused by his bravery. Enlighten me. Thomas took a deep breath and looked directly into her eyes. If you take this to court, I'll make it public. Lillian smiled, but there was a shadow in her gaze. And you think that scares me? It doesn't scare you, but it makes you uncomfortable. And you hate being uncomfortable, don't you? Amelia tensed. Thomas was right. Lillian Blackwood built her reputation on the image of an unimpeachable woman, a benefactress, an unwavering businesswoman. A scandal of this magnitude would bring the press down on her. Thomas continued without giving her time to respond. I have proof of everything, of how you interfered in my private life, of how you manipulated Amelia to leave. And if you decide to go through with this, I swear every damn newspaper and every news outlet in this country will know. Lillian narrowed her eyes. That will affect you too. I'd rather that than you touch my son. The silence was heavy. Amelia felt her heart pound in her chest. Lillian slowly turned her head towards her. Do you approve of this? Amelia didn't look away. I don't need to approve of it. Leo is mine, and Thomas's, not yours. Lillian smirked. You have no idea what a mistake you're making. Thomas crossed his arms. We'll see. There was a long silence. Then Lillian elegantly stood up and picked up her purse. I'll think about it. Thomas and Amelia watched her walk away without saying a word. But both knew that this war was not over yet. The next few days were hell. Every hour, Amelia expected to receive notification of the lawsuit. Every call she received made her heart jump. But days passed, and nothing came. Lillian made no move, until, out of nowhere, Thomas received a message. Enjoy your victory. But remember, Thomas, there's always more than one way to win. Amelia felt a chill when he showed her the screen. What do you think that means? She asked in a thin voice. Thomas clenched his jaw. It means she'll leave us alone for now. Amelia sighed, but her body remained tense. I don't like this. Thomas looked at her seriously. Neither do I. But for the first time in my life, I think I beat my mother. And although fear still surrounded them, they knew they had crossed a line from which Lillian could no longer return. No matter what she tried next, Leo was still with them. And that was all that mattered. The air felt lighter in the following days. After weeks of tension, Lillian had retreated. There were no more letters, no more threats, no more attempts at manipulation. But Amelia was not completely at ease. She can't give up that easily, she said one night, while making coffee in the kitchen. Thomas, sitting at the table, watched her calmly. It's not surrender, it's strategy. Amelia turned her head with a frown. What do you mean? Thomas shrugged. That she won't do anything now because it's not convenient for her. But that doesn't mean she's accepted defeat. She felt a chill. That doesn't give me peace. It won't. But the difference is that now we know what we're facing. Amelia sighed and rested her hands on the counter. What if one day she tries again? Thomas stood up and walked to her. Then we'll be ready. She closed her eyes for a moment. She felt like she had been waiting for an attack for so long that now that the battle seemed to be over, her body didn't know how to relax. Thomas noticed it, and for the first time in a long time, he took her hand without her pulling away. Amelia. She looked at him and saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something that made her feel safe. I'm not going to let anything happen to you or to Leo. Amelia felt a lump in her throat. I don't want this to just be a war against your mother, Thomas. It's not. There was a long silence. Thomas lightly squeezed her hand. You said you didn't know how to trust me again. Amelia swallowed hard. Yes, and now? She looked down for a moment. Now I'm not sure. Thomas smiled, but not mockingly, but with patience. That's progress. She gave a dry laugh. Maybe. Thomas watched her in silence before letting go of her hand. I'll wait. Amelia looked at him in surprise. Wait for what? For you to be sure. And before she could reply, he walked away with a calm smile, leaving Amelia with a strange feeling in her chest. Because for the first time, she also wanted to wait. Because for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together. 1 year later, Amelia stopped at the park entrance and watched the scene in front of her. Leo ran across the grass, laughing out loud as Thomas chased him. I'm going to get you! Thomas shouted with that playful voice he only used with his son. Leo shrieked with excitement and sped up, but his father easily caught him and lifted him into the air. No! Yes! The two laughed as if the world was only theirs. Amelia felt a pang in her chest, of happiness, of relief, of something she didn't dare name, because after everything they had been through, after so many doubts and fears, they were here. Thomas noticed her watching and gave her a smile, one that didn't demand answers, one that simply said, I'm here. Amelia walked over and sat on their usual bench. Leo ran to her and hugged her legs. Mommy, Daddy runs really fast. Amelia ruffled his hair. That's because he has long legs. Thomas collapsed beside her, breathing heavily. I'm too old for this. Amelia chuckled. You're being dramatic. You haven't seen me when my back hurts yet." She shook her head and looked at Leo, who was already playing with the dirt. "He's happy." Thomas looked at her softly. "We are too." Amelia felt the warmth in her chest. A year ago, she would never have imagined this moment. Not with Thomas. Not with the family they had rebuilt. But here they were. Not with a perfect ending. Not with a guaranteed forever. But with something much more real. With the promise to keep trying. What an incredible journey. Did you ever expect Thomas to defy his mother like that? What do you think Amelia's biggest fear was? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more captivating narratives. Your support helps us bring these powerful tales to life.